Have you ever noticed that every new government's digital identity project sounds like was made by someone that forgets their Apple ID every week, or by someone that can't distinguish a waffle from a keyboard? Let's talk about that. Now, governments, especially in the EU, are pushing for the digital identity systems, and in paper, it seems it's being sold as something that seamlessly works, sitting on your phone. Um, and it's meant to also include your cash. At face value, might sound like a good idea if you're living in under a rock. Um, but what happens if that application becomes compromised? What happens if your phone gets compromised? Or what happens if that application ends up in trash in your phone? You see, your phone is has a very short shelf life. You replace it often. There's new ones coming up every year or so, and for a few, having the latest gadget is part of their annual flow. So the new model, new phone. But that is not what I wanted to focus on. The emphasis in the sales pitch is mostly around the fact that what we have is one ID and all the services are centralized. Cross-border authentication, less paper, instant verification, and the government, for the first time ever, maybe, are actually posing something that is meant to look like as efficient. Because nothing says secure like handling your identity to the same people that take months or weeks to hand over your driver's license, the permits to build your own house, or any other thing that usually it takes you a few hours in a line to get it back. In some cases, you actually wait for days only to return to pick it up and see the people doing it in that moment. So, the problem here in the what I wanted to talk about is mostly around the risks and a few things related to identity. There is no concept of a compromised identity, and this is a problem right now. So instead of focusing on digitalizing the identity, maybe we should probably focus on that first. And the reason why is pretty simple. Once your identity gets compromised, you can't reset yourself. It's not a password. You can't change. Well, there are a few cases where you do, but it's not. It's not something that is currently in place. There is no concept of a compromised identity. That means that if once your identity gets compromised, you're in deep trouble. And this currently leaves out all the other threats that this model completely ignores. Phone hacks, SIM swaps, SIM clones, which are rampant, by the way, because some of those clones are actually made by the operators that work on the telcos themselves because they're pretty vulnerable, low-paying jobs. And and let's not forget the OS level exploits. So this ecosystem is incredibly fragile, and yet we are posing something in it that can't be replaced. It's not difficult to find on the dark corners of the web identities for sale. And in some cases, those identity, especially if we talk about European identities, those with the chip, in some cases, that chip actually works. And that alone reveals a lot about the current system that is based itself on a physical element, something that has a chip and procedures to put that information inside, which has some encryption and a few other things that is meant to make it less prone to a few of the more obvious threats, like cloning. And yet, there are cases where those identities actually work. This obviously is obviously also excluding the fact that currently the current model, any call center operator most of the time will have access to a lot of the information that is pretty sensitive, like addresses, phone numbers, digital citizenship IDs, and a few other cases that are frequently abused by sales personnel on companies to essentially get the bonuses out. That's a thing. And yet, we are thinking about digitalizing it, making it even easier, and more prone to a lot of other threats. Even so, we're not solving the current threat model; we're actually increasing it and adding more threats to it. So, what happens if your identity gets compromised? Well, it's bureaucracy hell. Essentially, you're probably every time it gets abused, depending on the case, you might find yourself in some cases actually fighting a court, or actually trying to justify yourself that basically you didn't do that purchase. It's not your thing. You don't live there. They're all cases that I've seen in the past. And what happens if it gets compromised? Is there a place for, is there even such as a concept of a recovery? Can the system be designed for that? Because the current model doesn't. Okay, the idea of a centralization is not focused on security. It is essentially a single point of failure. It represents a huge risk, not just for data sovereignty, because it becomes data silo, and by making that, it's going to put itself as a huge target. But the little irony on this is that we are transitioning from worrying about data leaks and data breaches to worrying about if the Ministry of Login doesn't go offline and hope that it doesn't go offline. That doesn't sound right. So what's the future here? Okay, what happens if your government issued ID goes on an outage, or if the cloud service that they use basically burns down to the ground, or if that information is stored across the border? Because there is no control over how that data is transitioned. And operators, most of the time, cloud operators will go from saying we don't know exactly where data is to ensuring that it is within EU borders or US borders, whatever that is, just to make themselves look good. Well, chances are, if that is the case, you'll probably lose yourself in bureaucracy. And in case you haven't noticed, the last time you called tech support, it will probably be worse. So closing thoughts on this one. I don't think this will end well. Seriously, we need an identity system that is not just revocable, but recoverable. It should be controlled by itself, by its own citizens, and then not on some fragile system. The systems that we currently operate don't have the required resiliency to manage something as sensitive as one's identity. It's not just about rejecting the digital process. It's just that it is currently designed and built for failure. That's pretty much it. And let's hope we don't we don't go into an age where we hope that the next iOS update or Android update doesn't break you out of your own country, because that would be fairly ridiculous.